Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this Committee of Adjustment hearing to order. Before we get started this evening, I'm just going to go through the protocols for tonight's meeting. Tonight we have 7 applications for, sorry, it's more than 7. 9 applications for 7 properties. That's what it was. That we'll be hearing tonight. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have cell phones, if you can please put them on mute or turn them off. That would be helpful. If you are coming forward to speak to an application, there's a podium on the right for that purpose, or the ones that are online. When asking questions, please ask your questions through the chair, not directly to the person being questioned. The first order of business that we'll go through is to have any committee members declare any conflicts of interest that they may have, followed by requests for any deferrals of applications that are on the agenda. We have, I believe, a few of the applicants that are online. So what I'll do is I will ask them when they first come into their application right at the very start if they wish to do that. The committee secretary treasurer will then read out each application or a cluster of applications if it pertains to the same property with a brief staff recommendation and description of the application. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will then be asked to come forward or be brought into the meeting, be allowed a short overview to explain any further details that they wish to add at that time. Members of the committee will then have an opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public that wish to speak to an application. Any members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address for the record, try to limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present all questions or comments that they have that are pertinent to that application in that time frame. Persons making a presentation may not necessarily be allowed to return again to speak to the same application. And when I use the term application, if we have multiples for the same property, it'll pertain to that property. If there are, I believe there are maybe a few members of the public that are going to be coming in online, so we'll bring them in one at a time at that point. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if desired. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. Motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, a motion will be defeated and new motions will be made. If a motion is defeated, new motions continue to be made until a decision has been reached. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons that leave their name and address in writing with the Secretary Treasurer. There's a sign-in page at the back of the room for those that are here. If you're viewing online, you can email our Secretary Treasurer at Tarab, I can never pronounce your last name, sorry. At TAYA@PortColborne.ca, or you can call and leave a message at 905-228-8124 immediately following the hearing and leave a message to get a copy of that. Trusting everyone understands the process, I would like to ask if there's any conflicts of interest this evening. Eric?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I have a conflict on application 823-24-PC, vacant land Northland Avenue, as I am employed by Upper Canada Consultants, which is an agent on this, with this property.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any. I don't know if there's any requests or deferrals of applications of people that are here in attendance this evening or applicants. Not seeing any. So with that, Madam Secretary, the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the agenda tonight, we have 4 minor variance applications and 5 consent applications. Notice of the applications were circulated to the public on August 28th, 2024. The required agencies received notice of the applications on August 16th. A recommendation report for each application was prepared by planning staff and made publicly available on September 6th with an addendum package posted on September 9th. All correspondence received by September 9th were addressed in the recommendation reports. Those interested can view the recommendation reports online on the city's website or in person at City Hall. Those interested may also contact planning staff in person, by email, or over the phone to obtain a copy of the reports. Accommodations for alternative methods of viewing or obtaining the recommendation reports are available upon request. Please note that the zoning bylaw currently in effect is the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended, which will henceforth be referred to as the zoning bylaw. Additionally, please note that the addendum package currently featured on the City of Port Colborne's website has been experiencing some technical difficulties. If you would like to view the material featured on the addendum package, please see the table located at the back of the room. Our website provider has also been made aware and is working on a solution. Our first application tonight is consent application B1124PC and its accompanying consent application B1524PC for the lands municipally known as 5088 Highway 140, located in the special provision of the heavy industrial zone and special provision of the industrial development zone, as established in the zoning bylaw. The agent Weston Consulting, on behalf of the owners 140 Development Inc., are requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new industrial lot. The subject parcels are shown as lands to be severed and lands to be retained on the proposed sketch, where both the severed and retained lands are to be used for a future industrial use. In application B1524PC, the agent is requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of registering multiple easements for the purpose of access, utilities, servicing, and stormwater management. The subject parcels are shown as parts 5 to 11 on proposed sketch, where parts 5 to 9 and parts 11 are proposed to be conveyed for future industrial use, and part 10 is to be proposed to be retained for future industrial use. Given the recommendation reports, planning staff recommend that the respective consent applications be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff reports dated September 6, 2024. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the agent for the applicant here this evening? Oh, all right. Apparently they're online. We can't hear you. It looks like your mic's on mute. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Does that look like his mic's on mute from here? I can't see that far. It's too small. Looks like it's on mute.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
Needs to pull the string tighter. Still can't hear you.
Go to the next one. Allow him a chance to.
We'll give him a second. Still no luck.
Lighting up green, it's just that the no audio is coming through.
Yeah, we're still not hearing you, so it looks like you're still on mute, or not?
No, he's not. It's an audio issue.
Okay.
Bruce, can you hear him on the stream over there?
Do we have anybody else that we could try? Or is it waiting?
We're trying to promote the second one. He keeps declining to be a panelist, so we're also not sure what's going on there.
Technology is great when it works.
I love Zoom.
give him another minute, we're gonna try that. But the next applicant's having the same issues.
I thought you said the next applicant doesn't want to be on screen because of the
Okay, so we're still not hearing this, the applicant.
So Kevin just emailed me and said that he can hear us fine, so it may be
Right.
on our end. Diana, is the computer's muted?
This is the computer here.
No, they're muted.
I can ask to unmute this one.
It's muted.
Oh, it's over there.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay,
So
we're in business.
it wasn't you after all.
Sorry.
All right.
It's not you, it's me.
Just before you get started, since you're coming in online, you don't wish to defer your applications?
Not at this time, no.
Very
Thank you.
good. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen for my presentation. If you could just enable participant screen sharing, that would be helpful. Let me try one more time. Let me know when it's ready. Yeah, I can see it now. Thank you. Okay. Can you see my presentation? Good. And everyone can hear me fine? Awesome. Okay, so I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to go through our presentation quickly to give a visual and make sure that everyone's on the same page. Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Kevin Nunn, of Weston Consulting. I'm a planning consultant retained by 140 Development Inc. or BMI Group, here to speak on the two applications for consent for this property known as 5088 Highway 140 in Port Colborne. The subject property is located southwest of the corner of Highway 140 and Highway 58A. The property size is approximately 163 hectares, and the current use is vacant agricultural lands. The subject lands are irregularly shaped, but encompass all of the areas shown in the image on the screen. We've also highlighted the lands to be severed specifically on the subject lands. Specific parcels within these lands will be impacted by this consent application, and the details of which are described in our application and on the upcoming slides. To provide some context, this project has many moving parts, including certain applications that remain ongoing. There's an ongoing site plan application that was submitted by Stantec on June 17th, 2024 to facilitate a proposed industrial use on the lands to be severed. We also note that the Ministerial Zoning Order OREG 337-24, published on ELAWS August 30th, 2024, is also associated with the lands to be severed, and staff noted that the approval would be needed to be in place prior to their support of this application, which has been received. For a little policy summary on the subject lands, Niagara Region designates these lands as rural employment areas. The City of Port Colborne official plan designates these lands as rural employment, environmental conservation area, and environmental protection area. The current City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw dual zones these lands as heavy industrial withholding and industrial development withholding. The subject lands are intended to be developed for industrial uses, which are permitted within the heavy industrial development zones. The minimum permitted frontages within these zones is 30 meters, with the minimum permitted lot area being 0.4 hectares within the industrial development zone. The heavy industrial zone has no minimum lot area. The proposed 5 parts, which I'll show you, are in conformity with these provisions, with the exception of part 3 on a forthcoming slide. It'll become a little bit more clear, which represents a required right-of-way and has been discussed with city staff. As it relates to the special holding provisions, industrial development shall not be permitted on these lands until such time that specific studies, such as archaeological, geotechnical, noise, air, transportation, environmental, and tree inventories are completed. This is understood by the applicant. It is intended that these special holding provisions will remain unchanged on the retained lands until the industrial development is considered. The intent of these provisions is maintained and not in conflict with these provisions through this consent application. So to be clear, there are two components of this application. There is the consent for severance, which is the first component of the application, creating 5 distinct parcels, one of which is to be severed and the other 4 parcels to be retained. This is to facilitate the development of a new manufacturing facility. The second part of this application pertains to easements, which is the identification and registration of said reciprocal easements associated with the new facility on the severed lands and the lands to be retained. I wanted to bring attention to the fact that this application was submitted August 20th and notice was posted on the property, replacing the existing notice in the 3 locations on August 27th as per staff's instruction. Highlighting here, the existing ownership breakdown that was included in our submission package was provided due to the complexity of the underlying ownership associated with the subject lands. This application in front of you today will provide an improved situation that makes a little bit more sense. Here's the severance plan, a visual representation of what I've been speaking of. So you can see in green are the 4 parts to be retained for future development purposes, whereas part 5 in red is the portion of the lands where development will ultimately be proposed, associated with the MZO. I note that the eastern portion of the subject lands, the border between parts 5 and 2 on my screen, are split by a future right-of-way, which is part 3. The second part of this application pertains to the easements. This slide demonstrates the parts associated with where the easements are proposed to be registered. So we've provided this chart. There are 6 easements to allow private sanitary pumping station, to allow for utility easements, to allow for a new road alignment until such time as the road alignment can be dedicated, conveyed, or opened, or otherwise established as a public highway, to allow servicing for a swim pond to outlet into an existing water course, for BMI Group to retain access easement until such time that lands are conveyed, and to allow for sanitary, storm, utilities, electrical substation, and other access requirements that are associated and required as a part of the development application for the site plan and the MZO. At this time, I wanted to flag that we have read through the conditions of severance and our client team, and for the easements, and our client team is accepting of the terms of approval at this time. We are planning on working with staff to clear conditions as soon as possible to facilitate the severance in the interest of getting the site plan approved. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Any committee members have any questions at this time? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application, sir?
Yeah.
Just a hand before you start. If you can come over to the podium on the right under the monitor there. There's a gray bar in the front with a sorry, my right, your left. There's a little red button on the bar in front. If you could just hit that and your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Greg Gam, one of the neighbors. Just a quick question. You've got a new proposed road going through there from Klein Smith along the bottom, what used to be the Seaway Hills, and out to Snyder Road and Forks. Now, that's a country road. It's not designed for heavy traffic. There's winter load restrictions on it. You know, on the way here tonight, there was 2 kids walking their dog. Now, if they're going to do this, they're putting sidewalks in down Forks Road to make it safe for all the locals.
That's not part of the application at this time. That'd be like a site plan agreement that the city would have to come up with the applicant.
Well, okay, this is what I got in the mail. And
no, I get
it's
you.
all gibberish.
This is just to split the land. The one application is to split, as per the one application where the pink was for part, I believe it's part 5. And the other one is just to give them easements in perpetuity to service those lots. As far as the development of it, that's got nothing to do with us this evening.
Thanks.
Did that answer your questions?
Yep, for now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this application this evening? We don't have anyone online, do we? Nope. With that, I don't know if the applicant has any further comments they want to add at this time?
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, there will be an appropriate time to work through city standards to develop a right-of-way in a way that makes sense for the future development. So your comment is heard. This is simply to separate the pieces at this time. And if there are any neighbors who need to get in contact with the planning company, my contact information is provided. So I'm here to answer any questions and pass anything along to the applicant or to the client rather.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, Angie?
I would just like to move it.
Okay. No one objects?
All right, thank you. Application B 1124-PC. Shall I do them both together or? Okay, and also application B 1524-PC. Lands legally known as Concession 5, part lots 16 to 19, and part road allowance, reference plan 59R 1531-2, parts 1, 5, 6, 8 to 11, 14, 16 to 19, 37, 39, and 42, formerly in the Township of Hubbardson, now in the City of Port Colborne, located in a special provision of the Heavy Industrial Zone, HI 46, and special provision of the Industrial Development Zone, ID 47H. Okay, and I believe the same numbers are on the next application, yes. Okay, that consent application B1124-PC and consent application B1524-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 6, 2024. For the following reasons. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will comply with provisions of zoning bylaw 6575-30-18 as amended, and with OREG 337-24.
Thank you. A seconder to that? Eric, any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And Madam Secretary, the next application, please.
Our next application is minor variance application A2024PC for the lands municipally known as 1628 3rd Concession Road in the Hamlet Residential Zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The agent Isaac Adams, on behalf of the owners Emily and Andrew Brandes, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit an increase in height of an accessory building under reconstruction, notwithstanding the following. That an accessory building height of 7.1 meters be permitted, whereas a maximum height of 6 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A2024PC be granted as the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant online? All right. I'll start with that next time.
They should be in the room. Just whenever he decides to go in the room.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
We can. Do you have video enabled? There we
There
go.
we go.
So just before you get started, since you're coming in online, do you wish to withdraw or defer your application this evening?
No, sir.
Very good. The floor is yours.
I don't really have too much to add. We're looking to increase the height of a building that is going on quite a large property for a mother to move onto the property to essentially spend more time with their grandkids and help with the day-to-day family stuff. We have a zoning bylaw that is 6 meters, and we're looking to build the structure at 7.1. We have support from both the planning department, NPCA, and the region, and we're just looking to have this looked after tonight.
Very good. Any questions? Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. Just looking at the application and looking at the architectural plans, there's a little bit of confusion as to what the intended use is. It says music studio on the application plans in the above unit part. And then if you look at the application, it does say accessory dwelling unit at one point, but then also says, it refers to the storage area being, if the minor variance were not permitted, it would have an issue with the storage area. So I'm just wondering if you can provide some clarification on that.
Sure. So it's an ADU unit for the mother to move onto the property. There's a storage unit that is above the garage section. Originally, we started the project. The client was looking at having a music studio and doing an ADU. That wasn't really something that would work with the client's budget. So we have it as a storage area, and the back area is the ADU.
Okay. Angie?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I actually have the question for staff. I do see that Melissa Bigford-Lofquist sent an email with several questions in it, and I would just like to have staff address the question so that the public can hear that, please.
Was the correspondence separate or was it?
It's in your package.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
Yeah. Dana or Denise want to take a stab at it?
Through the chair to the committee member, the staff report did answer the questions from the resident. If you just want to refer to that, we did indicate that a building permit was issued for the construction of the accessory structure on April 23rd. Before the building permit was issued, planning staff noted that the proposed height of the dwelling surpassed what the zoning provisions permitted. The applicant was told to either apply for a minor variance or reduce the height of the structure, which resulted in the submission of the minor variance application. That's before you tonight. The building permit was issued to allow the applicants to begin construction while the minor variance application was being processed. So planning staff requested the building division to not proceed with any more inspections pending the decision of the Committee of Adjustment tonight. If the committee did not approve the height variance for the accessory building, then the applicant would not be permitted to go over the maximum height of the zoning bylaw. So they would have to address that.
Thank you for that. I just further question, because it's in the public realm and there have been questions about it. I noticed a little bit on social media, so I really want to make sure that it does get addressed, specifically as to why building permits were not issued before construction started, and whether there were penalties. So those are the specific questions, please.
Just to that point though, if they made application in May 29th, why did it take so long to get to us today? Is there a holdup? Is there a stumbling block?
Can I speak to that behalf, sir?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we started the process right away. Essentially, we started the process of getting a demolition permit and a building permit back in March. It took some time to work this through the planning and building department. Eventually, we had our building department, our building permit that was awarded to us. They told us about the height restriction. Immediately, we called the planning department to see if this is something that we could address with a minor variance. We were given direction that in the town of Port Colborne, minor variances have been given out up to 7.3 meters, and given a location and the extra large lot and the community that we were in, that a 7.1 meter height would not be an issue at all. We started the process right away, filled out the application, started dealing with both the planning and building department. We were asked for additional information, which we gave, and then it took some time to be circulated through the NPCA in the region. Once it was circulated through July, we were told that we would be on the August hearing. The day before, the town reached out to us and said that they would like some more detail on our site plan. So the evening before the August hearing, they asked that we would be deferred into September and then update the site plan so that it could be giving a few more details for their planning department. So immediately we revised our site plan to show the more details that they had asked for. Then it was recirculated again through NPCA, recirculated again through the region, and again given their support in both departments. And the planning gave us their support as well. So it's been a long road. We're in a challenging position where we have a mother of the client that is currently living in the home. Right, early August, we were understanding that we would have all this completed at the August hearing. She has given her notice to move out of her place where she's dwelling right now, hoping that we have everything completed late September, early October with the minor variance.
So if I might, notwithstanding all of that, you still went ahead and completed the project?
So before completing the project, so just so you're aware, the project isn't complete. What we've done is right from the very beginning, we spoke to the building department and said, listen, we understand that you would like us to either A, stay at the 6 meters, or B, have put in an application for a minor variance. We have no problem doing either. We would prefer to go for the minor variance and go for the and complete the application for the additional meter in height. We were supported by the building department, said, no, we completely understand. We support this. We don't see there being any issue with the additional meter in height with this project. And we will follow up and complete all your inspections and allow you to continue to build. And please start the process of the minor variance application. So we followed the direction of the building department and the planning department and continue to build while in the process of this minor variance application.
Yeah, but just going back to your comment though, you said you were okay with staying at the lower level. What is it currently at right now? It's at the requested level, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
So you've rolled the dice, assuming we're going to accept this, and if we don't, then you're going to cut off the roof?
That is the situation we're in. And again, we spoke to the planning department prior to starting the process, and they had a lot of confidence that this wouldn't be an issue in the area. I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but
quite familiar with it.
Yes, sir. So it's a country lot with not very many close neighbors. It looks fantastic there, and we were given direction saying we can't see any issues at all, and we see no problem with you moving forward with construction.
I guess where my concern is that you've gone ahead and broke the law. And now you're asking for forgiveness. That's the only concern I have. I realize staff said that it should be supported, but it doesn't mean it's going to be supported, and yet you still continued on down the path. I appreciate your situation of getting someone in there. However, you still continued to go down and finish it off. And
well, sir, if I could speak to that, right? So we haven't done anything without the direction of both the building and planning department, to be completely transparent to you, sir. We asked if we were giving the building permit, could we allow to start the process? We were given direction saying, yes, sir, you can start the process. We said, well, our roof trusses are designed. We would like to go to the 7.1 meters. Can we still continue, have our framing inspections and move forth? And both the planning and building department gave us direction to say, yes, there shouldn't be any issues at all with a minor variance. You should be fine to proceed. So that is, we essentially, we followed up every step of the way with the city of Port Colborne, took their direction and moved forward with the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to address this a little further. My concern is what happens out there in the public and how they see this. What they see is that someone has decided that they don't need to worry about the rules. They don't need to worry about the paperwork. They can just go ahead and do what they want and try to fill in everything as it follows later. And as you said, roll the dice and, hope that it works out. And you're right, the building does look fine. It looks good. That's not the issue. The issue is there are rules in place and they weren't followed. And clearly there doesn't seem to be any repercussion for that. And that's the problem. That's the message that goes to the public. And I really find it's difficult to believe that the building department would support this. I've not ever known them to do that. So it's just it's an odd situation, and I just feel that their staff should be addressing this on some level. If not with this particular application, then put some policies in place that change things for the future, because this is a bad message for the public. Thank you.
Could I please speak to that, sir?
Sure.
So we are essentially, we were working with the building department to complete our building application. We started off the process, if you would, with asking if this is something they would support. Right away, the building department said, we will absolutely support this application. The first step for you is to is to do a demolition permit. We completed the demolition permit application at the same time as we submitted the building application. Through the building department, they looked at both and said, there's absolutely no problem here. We'll give you the permit to knock down the 2 existing garages, and we will work on completing the building permit for you. We followed up weekly to confirm that everything was okay. After about 6 weeks, they had told us that the permit will be ready for pickup on Friday. We scheduled our foundation to be dug on the following Wednesday. On Friday, we called and we couldn't get in touch with anyone. We followed up on the Monday and again couldn't get in touch with anyone. On Tuesday, we pushed off our foundation company and said, let's push everything a week. We've been told we're getting the permit. There shouldn't be any issue. On the Wednesday, we went to the office to pick up the building permit from staff, and they said, actually, I'm sorry, we can no longer support this because there is a zoning issue. We didn't realize it, although we passed everything and told you we're giving you the permit. You're actually a meter higher than that's allowed in the zoning. And we said to them, okay, well, you've already given us direction to knock the buildings down, which we've done. We've paid for it. Our client has everything in storage buildings right now. We followed all of the process, and you told us we're getting a building permit. The foundation company has an excavator on site ready to dig to complete the foundation package for us. And now today you're saying suddenly, no, things aren't working. So I spoke personally to the CBO and I asked him, what's the challenges? What's happening here? He said, well, you know what? Unfortunately, we are supposed to start the process with the planning department and zoning, which never happened. And it got this far along and we have a bit of an issue. I said, that's understandable. How can we correct it and how can we move forward? He said, I understand your situation. Let's look at what options we have. He said, you know what we could do is redline your blueprints for a height restriction of 6 meters. Then we can reach out to the planning department and see if you can get a minor variance and get this project started. So they issued us the building permit. We redlined the 6 meter height restriction. We followed up the very next day with Chris in planning and called him and asked for his direction and said, listen, we have a building permit. If we try to stay within the 6 meters, we can do it, but the building won't look attractive to the community. It won't look nice. Do you believe we'll have support if we do the minor variance application? He said, absolutely. The town has just passed an application at 7.3 meters. In your location, there will be no problem for the 7 meters, or 7.1, sorry. So we started construction. We worked with the building department. We worked with the inspectors. We did all of our inspections all the way through and followed everyone's process. We immediately applied for the Committee of Adjustments hearing. For the minor variance. Our expectations were that it wouldn't be until September that we finally got to have the Committee of Adjustments hearings. Our expectations were that in July, we met the Committee of Adjustments hearings, early stages of construction, had this sorted out, and have no issues to move forward with, right? So we have been, honestly, as somebody in the building industry, we have followed everybody's direction to get to this point, right? And what we're looking for is asking for the additional meter and height. And it's not because we haven't been following the process that you guys have asked us to do.
Okay.
And it wasn't because.
Let me stop you there, because you're just going around in circles now. I guess, so just to be clear, you were issued a building permit for the height listed currently within the bylaw. It was redlined, and so you were told to go to this height, but yet you still went past that without having a proper permit to do that.
No, sir. We were given direction from both the planning and building department.
Okay, no, given permission and getting a permit are two separate things. So you've gone ahead without a revised building permit to go to the additional height. Even though, yes, they may have said that you should have no problems. However, just so you know, and the rest of the public knows, Committee of Adjustment hearing decisions are not precedent setting. Every property is looked at on its own, and so even though that property down the road or wherever may have been granted it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it as well. So you've took it upon yourself to go and violate the building permit at the end of the day. Now, is that not the case?
Well, sir, the building that we have on site matches everything that we applied for the building permit.
But you don't have the building permit to do that. You have a building permit for a lower. No, you have a building permit for a lower elevation. So anyway, so that's why I just wanted to be clear. Gary, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the chief planner. So one of the questions that Ms. Bigford asked is, were any penalties applied for not getting proper permits before construction started? Do you know?
Through the chair to the committee member, construction wasn't started before a building permit was issued, best of my knowledge. The applicant did receive a building permit. The application on the building permit, it was redlined and said that it would not exceed 6 meters in height. The intent was so that they could proceed with the initial phases of the development before getting to the roof of the dwelling, the accessory structure. The intent was that they could start the construction and then that they would proceed with a minor variance application. If it was approved, then they could go to their desired height. If it was not approved, then they would have to reduce it.
So my second question is, the building's up. Were or are penalties going to be applied for building to that height before we're through?
Through the chair to the committee member, typically we work with applicants to resolve any issues. If someone was to build something without a building permit, they would be told, please get a building permit. If they don't get a building permit and they continue not to get a building permit, then we could possibly go down the route of penalties. In the instance of building permit here, they did get a building permit, so that was not of concern. With zoning compliance issues, it is a different kind of route that we would have to follow. We can't just issue penalties. We would have to proceed that legally against an owner for building not in compliance with the zoning bylaw. So generally our approach is to work with them to comply. If we can't get to compliance, that's when other avenues could be followed up.
So through you, Mr. Chair, it seems to me that you could easily have a situation where he said, she said. But in this case, I don't see the building department for the as-built, which is completed, that there is an intention to fine them, and it doesn't sound like there is a forward intention to fine them. That tells me that our department, if you're not fining them, you acquiesce and stand by what you said, which for me, that means that the applicant has done all he could, and if that wasn't good enough, he should be fined, but he's not being fined. So I tend to believe what the applicant has said, and I think that if I was the applicant in this case, I would have heard from the building department, stop right now until that's done. So I don't know that the applicant here every time he saw a barrier, he consulted, unless the chief planner can tell us differently, with the planning department, with the building department, and in the absence of the building department said, you're still going to get a fine for starting. We can't turn back the clock, and they're not. Then I think the applicant did everything he could, and so I see that point as mute now. If our own department is in agreement to what they did, the fault layers in us doing it differently going forward. But that's not a decision for, I don't believe, the Committee of Adjustment. So on that basis, while I understand the progress, I don't see where the applicant, having checked along the way, was ever told to stop. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I will agree with you that the fining and the fees is not the prerogative of this committee. The only thing I would further ask the applicant is the property, is this addition currently being occupied?
No, sir. We're still well under construction.
Okay. Is there any other questions of committee members? Is there anyone online that wants to speak to this? Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Tim? Podium on your left, my right. Just your name and address for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Melissa Bigford Lofquist, 173 Chippewa Road. I had wrote in the questions, but after reading the planning report, the permits were issued in April. If the permit application was submitted properly and according to the Ontario Building Code, then all agency requirements prior to the start of construction would have been followed. This is evident in the agency reports, which indicate that substantial progress on the accessory building had occurred when information was requested, and the fact that minor variance application includes a charge for minor variance without permit fee. The subject property contains possible unevaluated wetlands. However, as work was nearing completion, the MPCA had no objections, yet stressed any future development on the property will need to be circulated to the MPCA for review and approval prior to any ground disturbance. The region report also states how the accessory structure had been constructed, and therefore the disturbances had already been taken place, so none of the environmental protective measures, including an environmental impact study and an area of ecological significance, were in place or enforced. So if a building permit was issued before construction started, all the requirements of the PPS, the Niagara Regional Official Plan, and the MPCA would have been met, therefore saving a substantial amount of money and significantly possibly of not being allowed to construct the accessory building where it is. This accessory dwelling unit is substantially larger than the demolished garages. It also is not located exactly where the existing garages were located, which is evident by Google Map photos taken before demolition and where the current completing dwelling is situated. This also sets a precedent that homeowners can build a unit, start construction, then seek permission approvals after the fact. Since the permit application was submitted after construction was completed and all the protective measures and policies of the PPS, NOP were not enforced, would this minor variance accessory unit be in compliance with the 4 tests of the Planning Act? Specifically, is it desirable for the appropriate development or use of land, building, or structure? The minor variance application for this accessory unit was applied for on May 22nd, 2024. So why is the structure within the higher height already constructed? Why has work continued on the accessory dwelling unit throughout this process, even though the planning report said inspections had been halted, and yet work trucks were at the property today? Why did the applicant not wait for approval from this committee, public input as required under the Planning Act before completing the accessory dwelling? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess to your point, or the presenter's comments, I don't disagree with some of the comments. I will say that the committee's request today is just on the height, not necessarily on the location and everything else. That's a different department from us, so I'll leave it at that and won't tread on that. But like I say, we're just here to determine the height, assuming all else was done correctly, because it's not in our power to comment directly on that or have any authority over that. So with that being said, is there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Is there any final comments from the applicant this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you. Recommendation, Eric?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, could I make one comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just through you to the committee. Despite all that got us here, as you said, we're just focusing on this one particular variance, which is the height. But not only that, we are to analyze this variance based on the 4 tests and just the 4 tests alone, really. So, despite everything that's happened to get us to this point, that's our purview, as you all know. So, my decision is going to be based on that 4 test. And with that, I will move that, that application A20-24-PC, legally known as Concession 4, Part Lot 18, located in the Hamlet Residential Zone, minor variance application A24-PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature. It is appropriate for the development of this site. It is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. It is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. I get a seconder to that. Gary? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Be carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Madam Secretary, the next application, please.
Our next application is minor variance application A2124PC for the lands municipally known as a vacant lot on Steele Street located in the special provision of the first density residential zone, as established in the zoning bylaw. The owners, Henley Heights Construction Incorporated, are requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a new detached dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit notwithstanding the following. That the total accessory lot coverage of 14% be permitted where a maximum of 10% is required, and that an accessory dwelling unit with a floor area of 45% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling be permitted, where a maximum floor area of 40% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A2124PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and the purpose of the zoning bylaw, and it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant online? Applicant is here.
He's here.
Awesome. Please come up to the podium on your left, my right. And the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to thank planning staff for their report. I really have no further comments to add, just to hear if there's any questions for me.
Any questions or comments of the applicant? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Do we have anyone online for this one? No. So with that, Gary?
I'd be prepared to move this, Mr. Chair.
Very good.
Thank you. With respect to application A2124PC, lands legally known as Plan 792, part of Borden Avenue, east side of Knoll Street, Part 2 on reference plan 59R17514, that minor variance application A21-24PC be granted for the following reasons. 1, the application is minor in nature. 2, it is appropriate for the development of the site. 3, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. 4, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Angie? Questions or comments? All those in favor? Sorry, did you have a question?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, to planning staff, can you just confirm whether there's enough parking to accommodate this accessory dwelling unit?
Through the chair to the committee member, yes, we did confirm that there was enough parking. It's not shown on the plans, but we confirmed through email later on, yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
As further to that, parking is allowed in tandem for the accessory dwelling unit, so there is enough. We're setting the building back far enough to allow tandem parking, so no further variances are requested for parking.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor? That'd be carried. Thank you. And Madam Secretary, the next application when you're ready.
Our next application is minor variance application 82224PC for the lands municipally known as a vacant lot on Field and Avenue located in the second density residential zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The owners, Henley Heights Construction Incorporated, are requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a semi-detached dwelling with accessory dwelling units, notwithstanding the following. An accessory dwelling unit of 45% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling be permitted, where a maximum of 40% is required, and a maximum lot frontage of 14.7 meters be permitted for a semi-detached dwelling, where a lot frontage of 18 meters is required for a semi-detached dwelling. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application 82224PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate in development of the site, is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. And I see it's the same applicant, so anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No, sir. Again, the planning report did a great job encompassing all that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. No one online. With that, Gary?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to application A22-24PC, parts of lots 1 and 2 on Plan 773, Part 1 on reference Plan 59R16307, located in the second density residential R2 zone, that the application is minor variance application A2224 be granted for the following reasons. 1, the application is minor in nature. 2, it is appropriate for the development of the site. 3, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. 4, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Eric? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Secretary, the next application, please.
Our next application is minor variance application 82324PC for the lands municipally known as a vacant lot on Northland Avenue located in the residential development zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The agent Matt Kernahan, on behalf of the applicant 2600261 Ontario Incorporated, are requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit the construction of a new subdivision notwithstanding the following. That a minimum setback for uncovered stairs of the first story of a dwelling to a lot line of 0.3 meters be permitted, whereas a minimum of 0.5 meters is required. That a parking space obstructed on 2 sides be permitted a minimum width of 3 meters, whereas a minimum of 3.5 meters is required. That a minimum lot area for townhouses of 160 meters squared be permitted, whereas a minimum of 180 meters squared is required. That a minimum front yard setback of 6 meters be permitted, whereas a minimum of 7.5 meters is required. That a minimum corner side yard setback of 3 meters to a dwelling be permitted, whereas a minimum of 4.5 meters is required. That a minimum corner side yard setback of 1.5 meters from a deck, 1.2 meters or greater above the ground floor level to a lot line be permitted, whereas a minimum of 4.5 meters is required, and that a maximum dwelling height of 12 meters be permitted, whereas a maximum of 11 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A2324 PC be granted, as the application is minor in nature, is appropriate for the development of the site, is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here this evening? I see him walking over. Little red button in the middle there, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and thank you. My name is Matt Kernahan, and I represent the owner of the Northland Estates subdivision, 2600261 Ontario Inc. I'd like to begin by commending staff on the stellar job that they've done on the report before you this evening. They've done an exceptional job at explaining the nature of the application and doing their analysis on the requested variances. I'd also like to extend my thanks to staff, including Diana, Denise, David, and Taya, for their collaboration during this planning process. They've provided us with exceptional customer service. I can confirm that I've had the opportunity to review the report before you this evening with my client, and we are in total agreement with the contents of the report, including the recommendation to approve the requested variances. I believe the committee may have received some late arriving comments from a member of the public objecting to the development of the application. I'd like to take a few moments to address these comments in my submissions to the committee. Firstly, I'd like to respond to the comment that staff did not properly prepare the notice for this application. Respectfully, I disagree. The explanatory note on the notice for the minor variance application is very clear. The purpose of this application is to permit the development of a residential subdivision. More specifically, it is to permit the application will provide relief from 7 regulations of the city's zoning bylaw. The notice lists them in detail. There is nothing more before the committee this evening beyond the relief sought from those 7 regulations. Secondly, I'd like to address the comment that the application goes in the face of the recently approved zoning for the lands. Again, this comment is not supported. For the reasons outlined in the staff report, the application is minor and is in fact consistent with the intent of the zoning bylaw. Lastly, I'd like to address the comment that the application is premature and will result in impacts on the sanitary system. The purpose of this application is to provide relief from zoning regulations that will permit more compact, affordable housing to be built on the subject lands. In the intervening 2-year period between when the application for the Northland Estates subdivision was made and today, market conditions have changed drastically. The requested minor variances will permit the home builder to construct a more compact, affordable housing product that is desired by residents of today. With respect to sanitary capacity, the minor variance will have no impact on this matter. I should mention that the resident who wrote into the committee appealed the zoning for the Northland Estates subdivision on the basis that it would have an impact on sanitary capacity in his neighborhood. The Ontario Land Tribunal dismissed that appeal on the basis that there was no connection between the zoning on this property and sanitary capacity issues, and that sanitary capacity is better dealt with through the subdivision process. The draft plan of subdivision for this site is currently approved. The draft plan of subdivision addresses the matter of sanitary capacity adequately. Though a red line approval to the subdivision will be brought forward to council for council's consideration in the future, it's not before the committee this evening, and the minor variance does not rely on it. In summary, I'd like to reiterate my client's support for the recommendations contained in the report before the committee this evening, and thank staff for their hard work on the application. Thank you.
Questions or comments, Angie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Kernahan, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to address the public's concerns. I think that is always a good thing to do, so thank you.
Gary?
Thank you. I'm glad that you also took on those questions because I was going to ask our planner to, or you to. However, there's an aspect that I'd like either our chief planner or Mr. Kernahan to deal with. I did have an explanation on this, but more for public consumption on this. The public individual's question, if I can read between the lines, or at least in my own interpretation, is that if you make the minor variance that changes setbacks, that the net result of that it can be de facto extra land, which then could be applied for more housing or a change in housing that could increase density. And whilst I normally would have no objection to that in going through the process, I didn't see why, if that's the ultimate intent, and maybe you don't know whether that is your client's ultimate intent, or maybe you don't need to answer that question without his approval, but would it not have been better to proceed with an amendment to the plan of subdivision and then ask for variances? Or that's really not the intent at this time?
Through you, Chair, to the member, Councillor, the majority of these requested variances address the configuration of a unit on any singular lot. There is one minimum lot area which will facilitate or could facilitate the increase in number of lots within the subdivision. It is no secret that the applicant wishes to increase the number of lots within that subdivision. And in fact, concurrently with the application for minor variance in early July, an application for a red line revision to the subdivision, which will increase the number of lots, was made. So our intention is to move forward with council's consideration of that at the earliest opportunity. Ideally, they would have happened, closer together. If I'm being honest, I'm not entirely sure when that will be considered, but we're hopeful that it'll be in the near future, and the matter of increases in the number of lots and, in fact, sanitary capacity can be dealt with at that time in front of council.
Just one last question. With respect to, and I've also heard the OLT's decision on the original objection, and it had to do with sanitary sewer through you to our chief planner. So can you clarify for me that sewage or utility capacities don't disqualify committee of adjustment applications per se?
Through the chair to the committee member, we are looking at the 4 tests for the setbacks that are proposed in the application. A question of capacity is not in front of you for the application. So you're simply looking at basically the lot fabric, what can be set on the property and how close they can be to property lines. So that's primarily what you're looking at this evening.
Great, thank you very much.
I would be happy to move this. Okay. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Because I got 1,000 questions. For starters, you're asking us to amend a bylaw. That's not within our authority to do. Let me finish.
Okay.
So, per our terms of reference for our committee, is to grant variances from the city zoning bylaw which are not of significant magnitude to require changes to a formal rezoning process. That's number one. Number two, these variances would apply to how many of these lots within your, I believe there's 237. Would it apply to all of them? Would it apply to some of them? Would it apply to one of them? A dozen of them? Do you have a number?
So if I can address your comment in pieces.
Sure.
Firstly, we're not requesting a zoning bylaw amendment.
Well, you're not directly asking for it, but in theory you are, because you're asking us for the third item to amend R373 to reduce the lot, which the whole zoning bylaw for that zone is your property. So you're asking us to change the bylaw, or the zoning for that R373 zoning.
If I may, the request is for a variance from that site-specific zoning bylaw.
Yeah, but the variance encompasses the whole bylaw, that whole zone, because the only place that this zone applies is your property. It doesn't apply to anywhere else in the city. It could, I guess, in the future. But if I'm not mistaken, the way the zoning amendment applies is very specific to your property only. So you're actually asking us to change the zoning of your property. We don't have the authority to do that, in my opinion. Because I do have the zoning bylaw amendment here, and it clearly states it only applies to your property. So you're asking us to change the zoning of your property. We don't have the authority to do that. It's a zoning bylaw amendment, which you've already applied for to get. And that's how we got here in the first place with that zoning. So that's number one. So what I don't understand is if you needed to reduce these lots even further, because originally per the R3 zoning, correct me if I'm wrong, 200 square meters is the requirement. So you've already asked to go to 180, now you're asking to go to 160. Why would you not just go back for a zoning bylaw amendment?
So respectfully, we're seeking relief from a site-specific zoning provision or a set of site-specific zoning provisions, which in our submission and staff's is minor in nature. As I mentioned, we applied for approval of the original zoning bylaw amendment over 2 years ago, when interest rates were very low, the economy was hot, and the product...
But that's got nothing to do with us here.
But
if you need to make a change, you make a change. Go back and do the process originally.
To your question, the product that was proposed 2 years ago, or that was envisioned 2 years ago when the application for the zoning amendment was submitted, and the product which is envisioned today are very different. And that's why the request for a minor variance from the site-specific zoning that was granted approximately a year ago.
And I wouldn't have an issue with it if it was 2 lots or 5 lots or one little block that we can clearly see what the impact of that would be. Here, you're asking for variances that wouldn't even actually apply to some of these lots. So you're asking us to grant you a variance to make a new zoning provision for your area. That's really what you're asking for. It should go back and be a zoning bylaw amendment, not a minor variance. This is no way possibly that you can consider this minor. Because we couldn't even determine what the impact would be on some of these. Because this might apply there, or it might apply over here. I don't know how we can come to that conclusion that it's minor in nature, number one. And the other part is it in the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? You're changing the zoning by these variances. So how can it be in the intent when you're changing a whole type of zoning in this section? Like, to me, that's not minor, and it's not in keeping with... If you wanted to keep in keeping, apply for a zoning bylaw amendment, address all of these issues, and you'd be good to go. And it's a council's decision at that point. Like, to try to do this, well, it's one chunk of parcel of land, to then say it applies to 270 lots, what happens when you come back and say, oh, well, we have this variance, so now we're going to change the zoning for these other ones over here, because the R3 applies to all of those over there. So instead of single detached dwellings, now you're going to build townhouses across the whole backside. That would be permitted. It's in that zoning. You can do that. So now instead of 273 lots, now you got 300 and something lots. Where does it end? Like, you're asking us for a blanket variance for this entire subdivision without knowing how it's actually going to be applied here. And that's where I have a big question or concern about this. Now, going back to my first question about how many lots would this actually apply to?
So, with respect, Mr. Chair, I don't have... The different variances apply to different lots. For instance, there are a handful of lots, we'll call it 4 or 5, that would require the variance for minimum lot area. They are at pinch points within the proposed subdivision that are slightly shallower than other lots in the subdivision. As an example, the variance for required side yard setback, exterior side yard setback is only proposed where there's an exterior side lot line. Similarly, the requested variance for minimum setback of porches to side lot lines only on those exterior side lot lines. The package that we provided staff with our application back in July was comprehensive. We included site plans for the entire subdivision, every single lot within it. So that package identified the location of where the various variances were required. I don't have that information for you this evening, but I can assure you that that was provided with staff, and I can only assume considered in their analysis.
Gary first and then. Sorry? Yeah.
I think your questions are fine, but the applicant has made an ask, and the planning department has deemed that it is in compliance. I just think your questions may be relevant, but they're directed to the city who's made that determination. So I think that the questions may be appropriate, but I think it isn't the applicant who's said that it's okay, it's the city. So I'm wondering if you would consider directing those towards the chief planner.
I'll ask the chief planner the same question. The reason I guess I started with the applicant is because they do have a planning report that supports this as well.
Okay.
So I guess that's point number one. The second part, like I say, is which lots do they apply to and how many do they apply to? To me, this, in my opinion, seems like a backdoor way of trying to get a zoning bylaw amendment. Now, I realize the staff's of the same agreement that this is okay, but I don't see how this could possibly be okay. But
I guess I would say on the second half, he's just indicated that he submitted them on an individual basis. So
fair. So to staff, I don't know, like I say, with regards to our terms of reference that we're to follow here, I don't know how we could be in compliance with this when there was a process for a zoning bylaw amendment. To me, there should be a revision to that zoning bylaw amendment.
Through the chair and to the chair and the committee, any landowner has the right to apply to vary a zoning bylaw. Just because it's a site-specific zoning on the property, it doesn't mean that they can't apply for a variance. The applicant worked closely with staff to determine that staff would support the variances, and staff's of the opinion that they meet the 4 tests in the Planning Act. Again, I've seen it many times where a zoning amendment has gone through, some time has passed, they need to make minor tweaks, and staff deem it to be minor, and it proceeds forward as a minor variance. If the applicant wanted to choose to go the zoning bylaw route, they of course have the option, but they have chosen this evening to proceed with a minor variance, and staff is supportive of the application. Please also note that, as Mr. Kernahan indicated, that there is a red line draft plan submission submitted to staff for review right now, and it would be up to council to determine if they want to support that red line application when it's brought forward to council.
So with respect to our terms of reference, there's no indifference to our terms of reference?
With all due respect, they've proposed a variance.
Oh, no,
variances to, I mean, someone can propose 20 variances. Anyone has the right to apply, and staff provide an analysis. We could tell somebody that's a zoning amendment, they could apply to the Committee of Adjustment, and we would proceed and review the application. We did work with the applicant, and we are of the opinion that 100% the committee can consider this as a minor variance. I mean, it's staff opinion that it meets the 4 tests. Of course, it's the committee's decision this evening for whether it meets or not.
The only concern I have is that you have an applicant that's in favor, you have a planning report that's in favor, we deny it, it goes to the OLT, and they say, well, these two guys agree, they're the experts, so these guys are just going rogue.
With all respect, that's not part of the conversation tonight. It's whether it's
Well, it is,
opinion.
because
No,
at the end of the
whether the
day,
applicant goes to the
you're
OLT.
asking us to violate our terms of reference.
I respectfully disagree. I could speak to Mr. Kernahan on how many applications he's done. I've processed in my 13 years. This has happened many times, and I've worked on many subdivisions. I've never once been questioned whether this can proceed as a minor variance. Somebody could attempt to change an entire zone and consider it a minor variance. Staff would assess the application and bring it forward. That's just like with any application.
So with that being said, how do we determine if it's minor in nature if we don't even know what lots it applies to? You've claimed that they're revising or they're working on a new plan of subdivision. So then how can we make that assessment that it's minor in nature when we don't even know what impact this may or may not have on these lots? Like, it'd be different if you maybe laid out and say, okay, lots 10 to 20 are this and 5 to 10 are this and this is this, and then we can at least look at those and say, okay, how do these apply? But some of these, if you just, it basically gives you a menu of, oh, I want to pick this one, I don't need that one, but I need this one, I want to pick that one. I don't know where that ever, I've been here almost 20 years and I've never ever seen anything like this, where it's an entire subdivision that you're asking us to amend with, it may apply here, it may not apply there. Like, I don't even know what the purpose of us being here then, if that's the case. Like, that just, I don't know how we determine that that's minor in nature. That's my position anyway. I don't fault the applicant for trying to do that, but why even apply for a zoning bylaw amendment? Just come for an application and there you go. You get it for the whole property, 20 lots, 100 lots, 200 lots, maybe 300 lots. I don't understand how that's not minor in nature to me. If it was a couple lots over here, we have this issue, we can't comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw, but we can tweak it over here. You're asking us to basically throw that out and grant you a variance to the whole thing, and for you to decide where it's going to apply and how it's going to apply. I have a problem with that. Angie?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. You certainly have brought up some points that are thought-provoking at the very least. And as a member of a committee of adjustment, we're sort of over a barrel in many ways because we're handed, as part of the process, we're handed a recommended decision. It's given to us by staff, and they very clearly outline that the four considerations have been met, the tests have been met. They put all the information together, and we rely on their expertise a lot. When we go against them, we've almost always ended up at the tribunal, and that's been a problem on its own. And nowadays we know that when you go there, you lose. So it's not a good situation in any situation. These points can't be ignored, though. So what other process is there to deal with the situation? I mean, what can we do? You're in a position where it's just almost not able to be decided. It's very, very frustrating here. And I'm wondering, is there another way for this gentleman to get his needs taken care of through a different process? Is there a way to do that? Should it be going to council under something having to do with the zoning?
The application, through the chair to the committee member, the application is before you this evening to make a decision. It was kind of the applicant's decision whether to apply through the minor variance route or whether to determine if it was a zoning bylaw amendment. As mentioned, staff are supportive of them kind of applying as a minor variance. If staff had said no, we feel that needs to go through the zoning bylaw amendment route, then we would have relayed that information. But in terms of making a decision, I mean, you've got yes, no, or kind of referral back to staff for this evening.
Gary?
I agree with Councillor Demery on so many points, but I won't go through them all. I guess I'm I don't know about my colleagues, but the age-old question of being on here for a number of years myself is the definition of minor. So I would have to say that there are countless times that one's logical mind, when things are 80% different or whatever, that the term minor is one that has always baffled many of us, I would say, members of the public and on the Committee of Adjustment. I hear what the chair says, and my logical side of my mind sees that. That's why I brought up my question that I did. I think there's always the distinct difference on what we think or what we would like versus what is. I think the most compelling answer that I've heard tonight is when the chief planner says that the number of zoning bylaw issues that come to the Committee of Adjustment are numerous in her 13-year career, which tells me that while I don't like it, I almost take that as I'm staking my whole career on it, but I'm telling you that this is not abnormal. And whether I agree with whether the definition of minor has been stretched to the limit, I wanted to pick is one thing, but I wanted to pick up on the other, and I don't know if it will make a difference. But the fact that what's not presented is there are, and the chair was right to ask this question, if the applicant has submitted a detailed plan about lots that this will affect, we don't have that, and it may not be all lots. Therefore, I'm not looking to see that if, you have 250 lots and 249 are marked there and you have one differently, that de facto doesn't allow you to do this as minor. I guess through you to the either the chief planner or the applicant, in that submitted detailed drawing, and maybe this doesn't make a difference, but out of interest, I would like to know how many of those lots are affected, and would you know or be able to glance at it with that many lots and indicate 60%, 50%, just from a visual point of view, either of you?
Through you, Chair, I see the chief planner scrambling, trying to find this this plan. I certainly don't have it in front of me, but what I can tell you is that, we had at least 3 meetings leading up to our submission with city staff that included the house builder, the architect, myself, and planning staff, wherein we went over these needs for variances in great detail. So while it may not be at our fingertips, I can tell you it is known. And if it would assist the committee in seeing that, we could certainly make it explicit on a plan and provide it to planning staff so it's at the top of their inbox, if that would help.
Questions. It seems to me that the alternative is always the 3 things: you approve it, you defer it because you want that information. If you reject it, then it's OLT and time. And in the interest of time for all, coming back to the council for that change, it's probably less time, potentially, than the OLT. But the middle of the road is that updated drawing. So I guess I would have to say through you to the applicant, is the updating of that and coming back to the committee a possibility? Are you able to do that, or is construction imminent, or where are we in all of this?
Through the chair to you, that's certainly a possibility. It wouldn't take, as I said, it's not, we don't mean to be clandestine about this. It's not like we're trying to hide anything here. We know where these variances are needed. It's a cartographic exercise to put them in a presentable plan and get them back to staff. I'd hope, we could get on a near future next type committee if we did that in a reasonably short amount of time, which I'm sure we could do. You won't be holding up building permits if you put us off another month. But you might be if we went to the OLT.
If I could, even with that, I don't know that we get any further on the argument. Is it applicable to be not to be minor still? And I don't know, after all this time, and including what the chief planner says, that changes anything about it still being minor under the Planning Act, not under our desire or want. So I don't know that I would be actually further along, although it may help the chair with his question. But I don't know that there's, unless other members of the committee could weigh in, besides there being that detailed map, how anybody would feel any different about this application by using this process to get through essentially a zoning bylaw amendment. To me, that seems self-evident. We've seen it here before. It's really about the breadth, so I'm not quite convinced that will help, but I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, Member Bruno has said it quite clearly, and I would have to agree that I don't think much is going to be served by sending this back and coming forward with individual lots and seeing what's going on with that. That definition of minor does get in the way, and there's no question. It's like the definition of affordable. It just doesn't work. So it does become a problem. And I think at some point we do have to rely on some staff expertise and what is presented to us. I do understand what the chair is putting forward, though. This is a very difficult situation. But I am willing to go forward with it tonight, so I will just leave it there.
Can I poll you as to whether you'd be in the affirmative or the negative?
I was just going to see if Councilor Bruno wanted to move it. I'm willing to support it tonight, or I'll move it if you want.
Well, we're still not quite there yet.
Yes,
but,
that's right. I was hoping that if you both had comments, I'd like
if Angie's done, I guess let me ask this question. If this plan of subdivision had gone into place already and was officially recognized and acknowledged, they would have to apply for individual variances for each lot. So by submitting a plan of subdivision, having it draft approval, getting a bylaw amendment, and saying, oh, wait a minute, we can just change all of these things, we can save ourselves, it's $1,300, as opposed to, I don't know, 50 lots, you're probably looking at 50, 60 grand for individuals. That seems pretty lucrative to me. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but to go and just blanketly change an entire, there was a reason why they needed a zoning bylaw amendment to start. And now you're asking us to amend the zoning bylaw with a variance. Just seems backwards to me. If they needed one to start, they need one now for sure, because they're even asking for more than what they asked for originally. Why didn't they just ask for a variance to start with? And we could have just varied the 3 points that they asked for originally. Now you're asking for 7 that may or may not apply to this lot, to that lot. That just seems backwards to me. I don't know how else to explain it, but whether you say you can do it or not, if I can see if you hadn't, there was no zoning bylaw amendment originally, okay, maybe this would be new. I'll give you that. Something we've never heard about. But if you've already gone down this path once, why would you not go down this path a second time? That's where I'm really stuck on this one. I know I've raised these questions to staff previously about this application when I first seen it. I didn't even have to wait for a staff report. That was my first comment, is how can this be a minor variance when it's clearly you want to rezone them, the whole section, and potentially have a pick and choose, like even if you go to the maximum dwelling height. So our variance says that, or the ask is to go from 11 meters to 12 meters. Now, nowhere in here, or in the ask that I've seen, does that also apply to the MU 70, is it 74? 74 zoning? It doesn't say that in here. It applies to this whole parcel. So now the applicant gets to pick and choose which ones, okay, it applies here, it doesn't apply there. So really you're asking for maximum dwelling height, and it doesn't define what the dwelling is. So in the MU zone, it could be a single detached, it could be a commercial property, and depending upon what it is, that variance change, or that requirement changes. So that's where I have a problem with this, is it's not very clear what's being asked. It's just like a little blanket. We'll take and pick and choose these like a menu and apply them how we see fit. I have a problem with that, and I don't think that's in the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Like, the purpose of the zoning bylaw is to tell someone, this is what you can build, here's the parameters, you need a change to this particular subdivision in character, fine. You get a zoning bylaw amendment, now it applies to here. But now you're asking us to just change it outright. I just don't see how that's minor in nature. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Chief Planner. Would there be anything, would there be any value in the two of you being able to re-speak this amongst yourselves in the interest of time and potential OLT hearings, to come back with a more full-throated backup as to why this is minor in the questions? Or can you answer the chair's questions tonight? Or would it be simpler, you're the applicant, it's your client. Is there any appetite that these questions could be answered in a more full-throated way if you had a month or not?
But through the chair to you, I can attempt to explain them better now. Certainly appreciate the opportunity. The major distinction here between a zoning bylaw amendment and a minor variance is that when we initially came for a zoning bylaw amendment, we established new permitted uses subject to certain regulations in the city's zoning bylaw, and we requested some variances to them through that process. Through this process, we're not requesting any additional or change in permitted uses. The uses which are permitted are satisfactory to us. What we're seeking here, and to be clear, in the interest of providing a product that responds to the need for affordability today, is some additional relief from the regulations of the zoning bylaw, specific to where singles, semis, and towns are proposed. Those are all permitted uses prior to this minor variance. They're all permitted uses following it. There's certain regulations which we're seeking relief from in certain areas of the plan. I'm not sure how better to distinguish the difference than that. In our opinion, in staff's opinion, that relief we're seeking is minor in nature. I can say in my 20-year career, just about every subdivision I've been involved in, whether it was when I was working in the municipal sector or in the private sector, has resulted in minor variances after the zoning bylaw amendment, whether it was on an individual basis or on a comprehensive basis. As a municipal planner, I was involved in several subdivisions that went through a process just like this. I can echo Denise's statement that it's not unusual. It's expedient to do it in this fashion rather than require dozens of homeowners to go through the additional process and expense of having to do it on an individual basis when the circumstances require it. Again, we don't mean to be clandestine here. It's meant to be efficient and in the interest of getting through the development process so houses can get built. And the reason why we're here today is because 2 years have gone by since we made our application. The product that goes on whatever lots end up getting created is going to be different, and it won't be today. It'll be another 10 months from now, in all likelihood. So as the process moves forward and the developer gets more certainty, they spend money on architectural plans. As they did that, in this case, it became evident that certain regulations required relief from them. And that's why we're here this evening. As I say, we've worked collaboratively with staff. Since the resolution of the OLT hearing early this year, right up until July, we had a number of meetings, and we're fully transparent. We provided very detailed architectural drawings for this stage of the game. And we're of the opinion that what we're asking for here is minor, and it meets those 4 tests. Staff share that position, and we're hopeful to be able to move forward.
So, before I open it up to additional comments, the one thing I want to be clear, I'm not against development. Like, if that's the impression, I hope I'm not relaying that impression. I'm all for development within the city. Trust me, I would like it more than anything. I guess all I'm saying is I don't think this is the correct approach to get what you're asking for. That's all I'm saying. If council, who 2 years ago or a year and a half ago approved your zoning bylaw amendment, wishes to change and accept all of these, hey, all the power to council. They're the elected officials. They're the ones that have to answer to the general public out there, as we're not. We're appointed to them to act on their behalf. But to me, this is telling or asking us to basically reverse or change council's decision to some degree on a broad base, that it's not an individual lot. If it was like a block or just this street or just this section because of this, this, and this, then certainly we could look at that and say, okay, this makes sense over here. We can see it's minor in nature. It kind of makes sense. You can, but generally speaking, it's still within the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, which would include the amendment to the zoning bylaw. And I don't see how we can square those two together. That's my opinion, but if no one else has any other comments, I will open it up to the floor. Sorry, Gary?
Yes, I was, to Councillor Demery's point, in this case, we have a planning department that's going to say the same thing to the council if it came back as a draft plan, zoning amendment. And the applicant has indicated how many times this kind of things happen. I got a lot more clarity of Mr. Kernahan's point about it is not abnormal to me to, over time, housing mix does change it. I mean, we've all seen density. This doesn't sound like it's gigantic from, singles to towns. And that same planning department will have to speak to council if it didn't think we've made the wrong decision. So while I haven't heard any more, I've heard Mr. Kernahan, but not the chief planner again. She's agreed that this isn't abnormal, and if the council thinks it is, I suppose she'll be taken to task for that. I don't think that opinion's going to change. So, on that basis, bearing anything new, I agree with Councillor Demery's last comment about to proceed.
Thank you. Anything further? We still got public to go to. Is there any members of the public here this evening that wish to speak to this application? Okay. And we do have someone online, so if we can bring him in at this time. Is that the submitter of the?
No, it's a different person.
Okay.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Hello, thank you. Just your name and address for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, my name is Shane Parisi. I live at 315 West Side Road. And despite a lot of the, I missed a lot of the previous, so I'm sorry if I'm reiterating on points that had already been made, and I missed previous meetings, and I'm coming to this all late. And there were some mail issues, so I didn't receive everything that everyone may have received that I hadn't. But I am an elementary school teacher. I'm a Tarion certified. I've completed my courses, which enables me to build homes within Ontario. I've been involved in builds in Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, and most recently here in Port Colborne. I built my home adjacent to the proposed development, and I'm just questioning a lot of the studies that I've seen and that I've heard tonight just in joining. And in my position is I'm asking that council deny the amendments proposed by the applicant and suggest that the applicant's plan be amended to remove the street houses on Street A, adjacent to all the existing residential houses on West Side Road and Barrack Road, simply for the reason these amendments were not given conclusive evidence as to how many lots we're talking about here. I still don't have an idea. The plan I received is very hard for me to read and see. I'd like to get more clarity on exactly what's happening here, but I think eliminating these roughly 44 townhouses along the existing residential would ease a lot of stress on mitigating traffic issues, wastewater, privacy, encroachment concerns, all of which my neighbors expressed to me are within their concerns in this development. All provisions the applicant seeking to amend will lead to a voluminous inflation of residents, likely beyond the capacity of whatever wastewater infrastructure the city has. Although plans are saying otherwise, I don't feel convinced, and I do not want wastewater flooding into my basement as a result of packing as many houses as possible into an utterly egregious profit fuel development, such as the one proposed at Northland Avenue. I feel that the tax-paying residents along this stretch of land are going to be impacted, and I just wanted to make it public record so that it's known that there were concerns prior to the development process. The other concern I had was with regard to the only two vehicular exits in this subdivision, both leading to the same street, being Northland Avenue, which leads to a traffic light. And I can only imagine the influx of this many residents. Again, we don't know how many, but as many as, who knows, 400, 600 cars in addition, and you're telling me that's going to have a negligible impact on traffic? I find that very hard to believe, particularly when we're talking about Monday morning traffic or Friday afternoon traffic.
May I hold you there for a second?
By all means, yes, please.
So just so you know, I guess a couple points of correction. One,
Okay.
First of all, we're not council, we're a committee of adjustment.
Yes.
Number two, we're not talking about the type of development and the zoning, the way it's currently proposed. That would be taken up at council meeting under the plan of subdivision provisions and everything else. We're just talking about 7 variances that are being asked that would apply to all of these lots.
Okay, and that's my concern, because those variances that the applicant seeks to remedy themselves of are bringing their lots closer to my own, and that's where the privacy encroachment is of major concern. Because as things stand with this development, I have 3 townhomes behind my house. So as I go out onto my deck, I'm looking into someone's house. And the 6 meters, I'm not sure if that is, which I think is 6 meters because it's so small on the sheet I received that I can't really see it. if that's 6 meters, that's relatively not high. However, the backfilling requisite to get that land to where it's going to need to build on it it'll be over maybe 7 or 8 meters. Who knows? And if that's the case, after it's built, what happens? They get a slap on the wrist, and that I'm looking at it for the rest of my time living in Port Colborne. Like, I'm just unsure as to what the repercussions are if they do exceed the height requirement, or the height, I guess the numbers that they've included on their plan. So those amendments, I think they just lead to a further encroachment. And on the immediately impacted, the only people who are the West Side Road residents and Barrack Road residents, who are the only ones immediately impacted, aside from infrastructural issues, which will impact the entire city. So the residents such as myself and my neighbors, they're the ones taking on the brunt of this. And it seems like it's just a push under Ford's More Homes Built Fast Act. And the city's trying to cash in to get some money on it. The developer's trying to cash in by this exceedingly populous development. To me, it seems exceedingly populous because all the concentration of it, the townhomes, are all along my backyard. So I don't mind the single residential. I'm not against developing. I think it's a great idea. However, there has to be some temperance. There has to be some kind of restraint given to 3 townhomes per one lot. And I don't see anything of a fence or any privacy that's going to separate my lot from theirs. So again, these amendments they're seeking, it's just bringing the development closer to my backyard and closer into my house, in essence, right? Because these neighbors are going to be very close. So those are my main concerns concerning this, particularly with another 2 subdivisions being proposed. And what I saw was a condominium complex across from Port Colborne Mall. This is a lot of development, and it's hastening very quickly, and it seems like a cash grab. And I don't know if our infrastructure can withstand this. And the plan itself, it reeks to me of someone from Toronto bringing what happened a lot in southern Niagara Falls to Port Colborne, which is a relaxing community away from the bustle and the strain of city life. And a lot of the retired people don't want to see that kind of population here, and the same issues that we're seeing in southern Niagara Falls, where we have multiple families occupying single residences and contributing to a major problem there. So given the 2 subdivisions, this subdivision, because the subdivisions I'm referring to are on the other side of Barrack Road going toward Welland. At the end of Kalali, I saw another placard there, and Northland Estates, the one we're speaking of tonight, plus that condominium. That's a lot of residents who are going to be living and served by one highway 58, which at times is very dangerous as it is to get on and negotiate. I can't imagine the amount of traffic that is going to be diverted simply to Northland Avenue and Highway 58, because there's no place else for those residents to go. So those are my main concerns with the study, or with the development. And as I said, I'm not looking to curb the development. I see that it's a very good idea to develop, and it will be good, but it just seems it's motivated a lot by greed and lacks foresight for the concern of existing tax-paying residents. And the existing provisions and bylaws the applicant wishes to contravene, they're not what needs amendment, but the applicant's proposed plan is probably what requires the amendment. And I would say it might start with, I know you're trying to build affordable housing, and you're trying to get those townhomes for people, which is good, but the concentration just seems so high in this particular case. And I'm just wondering if anything had been proposed by the applicant for existing residents, so that those immediately impact, such as myself and neighbors, if there might be an option to buy land from them and to purchase our privacy, to enable us to not be so crowded in where we live. As I'm saying, I have 3 townhouses literally an arm's length from my home. So it's quite an encroachment on our privacy here. And as I've spoken with my neighbors, I'm sure they feel very similarly in this regard as well.
All right, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker.
Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Parisi. I'm glad you joined the conversation because one of the things you said, a light kind of went on for me. Although I totally agree with the chair, some of what you've said is, in my view, a council decision passed already in a draft plan, or potentially how this goes could be a revisit to the council chamber in terms of if the density changes and an amendment. But what has come to light in what you say, and perhaps I can ask the applicant to come back up, that I have some concern about. So I certainly don't need to go over the whole minor or major issue, but the housing mix change, which I was concerned about in my initial question as being a de facto way of a broader density end result, was answered adequately. But the fact that, for a new reason, Mr. Chair, that drawing of which sites, which lots may be affected, seems to me to have some bearing if the overall number and use of the Committee of Adjustment doesn't concern me, in that I've been satisfied with the answers I've been given, but not seeing where those changes are, I think goes beyond the pale of what we want. So if we're looking at, and I don't want, the line can be a little blurry here between perhaps what council would have looked at if it would have came through that door. But I am concerned that those changes could impact the intent of the approval back at the time when there was a lot of work went into what might back onto existing homes. So if the result of all this changes the density, I'm not as concerned if the results of this changes the density in certain areas, because everybody left your presentation, I assume, back then with the idea of where things would be. And now where things might be up against those developments, and everybody left that as that not being the way. So I don't know if you can address it.
Through the chair to you, just to be very clear, this process here tonight will not have any impact on what type of dwellings are located where. The current zoning for the property permits single, semi, and townhouses throughout the property. There's no change proposed to that. Specifically, in the instance of Mr. Parisi, he is currently in a rear lot to rear lot condition with townhouses located along Street A. There are no minor variances proposed this evening, which will bring townhouses closer to Mr. Parisi. There's no minor variance proposed this evening that has anything to do with minimum rear yard setback. So nothing the committee will make a decision on this evening will bring any houses closer to Mr. Parisi, to be very clear.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else online? That's it. So, with that being said, there was only the one person online that spoke to the application. Like I said, personally, I'm currently of the position that we deny this and it should go before council for a zoning bylaw amendment to address these things. That's my position. I'd be willing to move that on the fact that the applicant is not minor in nature and it doesn't comply to the general intent and purpose of the current zoning bylaw or the amended portions that have been granted already by council. And like I said, if there was 3 points prior in that zoning bylaw amendment, now we got 7. If that required it, this should require it because it blankets everything else. Now, if the committee feels that if we had a more clarified, okay, lots 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and listed how each one goes, that may address the minor issue. And maybe that helps. I don't know, but I still say that, at least in that case, we would only be applying it to specific lots. However, those lots currently don't exist. Until the plan of subdivision has been accepted and implemented, it's just one lot. So I'm not sure the legalities of how you make, because there is no legal description to tag it to that lot. You would still have to tag our variance to the entire parcel, and then within that, the variances would get registered on title for every single one of those lots, and then someone would have to look at it and say, okay, well, I'm lot 26, okay, I have this, this, and this. At least then it would be clear, the committee would be clear on what we're granting, and then it could be passed forward to when it became a lot, then it would be here. But I don't know how that process happens to transfer to title in the case of a subdivision. That's my, like that part's a little maybe beyond our scope, but that's the way I position this, and the way it's currently situated, I cannot be in favor of the way it is. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, clearly we've got some pretty wide division going on. And I'm not comfortable with going forward and just calling the question and see where the chips fall. It's too important to get this right. We need to get it right. So I would suggest that this go back to staff and that staff work with the applicant to bring forward an application that is absolutely clear and can come to us in a way that the 4 tests are clearly supported and we can go forward with it. Could that be done and get it back here next month, so that, or at least hopefully next month, so that we're not stalling any processes that are going on? Ken? That would be my suggestion. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about that or how the applicant feels about that, but I really do believe that is a better way forward. I'm not comfortable with denying it. And after all that we've talked about, I'm not entirely comfortable with supporting it. So, I'm at that place. I would feel better having more information and having a very clear application.
So basically, you'd be looking for an adjournment to get more clarity as to how these apply to the individual lots.
Yes. Is that acceptable to the applicant?
I'm in the committee's hands on that. I can't tell you what to do through Mr. Chair. As I've said, there's no mystery around where these variances are proposed to apply. We know, staff knows, we just don't have it here for you to look at this evening. So it's not a terrible undertaking for us to go ahead and create a plan that numbers the variances and tags them to the lots, and maybe we can get a presentation that goes up on your screen so you can tag them to the lots. One thing I will caution you is that to the chair's point around having these variances stick to those particular lots in perpetuity through a registration process, that's not possible. This is one lot.
So that goes back to my point then. So you're saying it applies to this, and then I'm getting told by staff it applies to all the lots. Well, so which is it? I don't understand how it applies to the other lots if it doesn't get registered on title of all the individual lots.
Maybe I'll let the chief planner answer
Okay.
that.
I'm confused.
Through the chair to the committee members, my understanding from what Mr. Kernahan is indicating is that he will show you what the intention is for where the variances will apply on the future lots. But note that that's not necessarily 100%, as the zoning is to apply to the entire property.
So if I might.
It's one lot. That
Okay,
it will
fair.
not change.
I understand that.
And please note too, minor variances they're not registered on title. They never have and never.
No, but they are tied to that property.
Yes.
They may
it is
not
on
get
that
registered,
property.
but they are tied to that property. So how does this and the deciphering of this lot, that lot, this lot, how does that get tied to the individual lot so that they can apply them going forward?
Because it's on one lot, so it still stays. If you divide it up into multiple lots, it still applies.
If I listen to Mr. Kernahan and our chief planner, they're not saying anything abnormal. They're saying that they can show you what it'll be, so I have clarity to Member Demaray's point. But that doesn't mean that could never change. But I'm thinking, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, you've said that down the road, that those individual lots may change someday, and that's fine. You know, those changes will then have to be through a new process. At the time, what they're saying, Mr. Kernan is saying, as I understand it, is I can show you where these changes are on those lots. It doesn't mean they won't change again and again and again. I don't think that's any different than anywhere we've always been in this world. You approve a plan of subdivision as a council, this comes forward, and then if somebody 5 years down the road, because they haven't built that far, decides to make a change, that's surely permitted.
I'm not saying it's not permitted, but what you're asking for is a blanket set of variances that can be picked and choosed off a menu of how it applies here and how it applies there. I don't know how this committee can foresee into the future to say that, yep, you can apply that variance over there, but no, we didn't want you to apply it there, but you're going to apply it there because you've granted it on block to cover the whole thing.
But
that makes no sense to me.
Why the member asked for the month to clarify.
Well, fair. But the assumption is that these then get transferred to whatever's left and say, okay, you can only have the variance if it applies to the lot, to the drawing that was given to us there. And if you change it, you don't have your variance anymore. But now I'm being told, no, it covers everything and you can't pick and choose. You can't decide it's just that
Isn't
lot.
that consistent with what we've said from the beginning and is in the report?
And that's where I have a problem with it being a minor in nature and complying with the zoning bylaw intent and purpose. To me, the only way you can make it applied the way they're asking is through a zoning bylaw amendment. You list all these things on there and then you can apply them however you want to that subdivision and you're following the bylaw. You've asked for a change to the bylaw. This is a variance to the bylaw. It's called a zoning bylaw amendment. It's not a minor variance. There's a reason there's a difference. We're supposed to be looking at individual parcels of land to see how, you got away from the bylaw, not rewrite the bylaw. I have a problem with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I hear all of what you're saying, and I really do believe that we do need to put this off for a month, get the information that would at least give us more information. It is confusing as to if we're applying this to one parcel of land, not to individual lots, but one parcel of land, then it does seem to be more of a zoning change than it does anything else. But, maybe this month off and getting more information in the process can help us maybe do a little bit more research and do a little bit more talking between us and come to a better understanding. Because at this point, I don't think this is something that can be decided. But it shouldn't be denied just because it can't be decided right this moment.
And if the committee's decision is to adjourn this application to gain that additional information, I'm okay with that. But
then I'm
based on what I've heard to date, I don't know how I get from positive to negative on this, but negative to positive. But
I do move that we adjourn it.
And if you're going to make that motion,
I have made
I'll ask for a seconder. Gary seconded it. So with that being said, if there's no questions or comments, all in favor of adjourning? Okay, so we'll adjourn till next month, and hopefully we can get clarity a little bit before the next meeting, so we have some time to digest it, because I think it's going to be pretty complex to do that. So with that, for the last applicant who's been sitting there patiently waiting, Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Our last application for tonight is consent applications B1224PC, B1324PC, and B1424PC for the lands municipally known as 631 Lorraine Road in the rural residential zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The agent Stephen Rivers, on behalf of the owners Whiskey Run Golf Course, are requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new residential lot. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the proposed sketch, where parts 1, 2, and 3 are to be severed for future residential use, and part 4 is to be retained. Given the recommendation reports, planning staff recommend that respective consent applications be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff reports dated September 6th, 2024. That concludes the correspondence for these applications.
Thank you. I know the applicant is here patiently waiting. Feel free to come forward to your left, my right, and you can add any further comments you have at this time.
My name is Stephen Rivers. I am the principal of South Coast Consulting. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property, Whiskey Run Golf Course. I've prepared a presentation, and I certainly like to go through that. Go ahead to the next slide, please. As your staff has outlined to you, we're looking at a proposal for 3 new lots with frontages of between 75 and 90 meters and lot areas of over 1 hectare. Next slide, please. The existing parcel is a parcel of 36 hectares and over 1,000 meters of frontage. In the Niagara Regional Plan, it is designated rural. In the Port Colborne official plan, it's recently been redesignated to rural and environmental conservation area, significant woodland. The zoning has also been changed recently from to RU 82 to RR and to environmental conservation area, the RU 82 applying to the golf course. Next slide, please. That is the official plan amendment that has been recently adopted by Council, illustrating the environmental conservation area behind the proposed lots on the north end of the golf course. Next slide. And the zoning bylaw, again showing the golf course zoned as RU 82, the residential component of RR, and the environmental conservation area zone. Next slide. It's existing property. It's all being used as the golf course right now. A lot of my golf balls are lost in there somewhere. Next slide. The development concept is pretty straightforward. We have 3 lots from the north part of the property, the golf course. The land in behind is environmental conservation and to be rehabilitated or naturalized as woodlot. And the golf course continuing to remain in place. Next slide. Technical considerations that have gone into the council's decision on the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment was a stage 2 archaeological assessment that has been completed. Minimum distance separation, in my opinion, it conforms, and the planning staff and council agreed with that. The environmental constraints analysis and wildlife impact had been designated and zoned, as you've seen in the official plan amendments. Next slide, please. We had polled the public in advance of the official plan, zoning bylaw amendment, and the consent applications. Sent out letters to them identifying what we're, making them aware of what was going on. There was concern about increased traffic. Council agreed that 3 new lots is not going to be a significant increase. There was concern about noise. Again, we're looking at minimal noise increase. We're 3 residential lots, or are 3 residential lots. There was concern brought forward at the council meeting at the time regarding drainage, and the person's property has been wet since the glaciers retreated, and the water flows in the opposite directions there, so there was really no issue with regards to drainage. Next slide, please. So the advantage of the proposal is consistent with the provincial, regional, city policy encouraging infilling and intensification. It's an efficient use of infrastructure. It's on an existing road with existing drainage. Nothing's changing. It's making use of those. It increases the city's tax base resiliency. And the development constitutes, in my opinion, good planning. Next slide, please. And the planning considerations, the planning reviews were undertaken by the South Coast Consulting and City Planning, and the considered issues of the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Niagara Region official plan, the City of Port Colborne official plan, and the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw, both as amended. Next slide. To a large extent, we agree with the recommendations of your staff for the, certainly for the approval of the severances. We are concerned, however, with some of the conditions that have been applied. Not so much that they're applied, but where and how they're applied. So there's a condition number 7 related to the hydrogeology condition, where it says the nitrate impact assessment and water supply potential assessment be updated with the proposed location of the bed, dilution area, and groundwater flow direction for the location of the septic systems to be located appropriately to meet the nitrate condition requirements at the lot boundaries. Reasonable. This can be required of the building permit application and can be combined with condition number 8, requiring a written undertaking stating future purchase and sales agreements include a clause advising that the septic systems for the parcels 1, 2, and 3 will need to include pre-treatment with an effluent level of 5.5 milligrams per liter. The current condition number 7 is a step ahead of what, in my experience of over 40 years, has happened in the past. You create the lot, you require a septic system on it, you make that a requirement as is reasonable in the building permit. The building permit application deals with septic systems, and in this case, that's what we feel the requirement for the hydrology condition should be applied to as part of condition 8 to the building permit process. It's putting the cart before the horse. The builder will decide what size house is going to go on there within the limits of the building code and the requirements of the all the various appropriate legislation, where it's going to go. Trying to map that out now as a condition of draft plan, or of draft plan approval, of consent, is asking for stuff to be considered in advance of where it's likely going to happen, or where it may happen. So hence that condition, we're asking that it be combined. Or an alternative would be to put it in the standard agreement that the city has required as well. Next slide, please. The MDS condition, number 9. The pre-consultation summary did not, and I emphasize, did not mention anything about a minimum distance separation requirement. The region recommended city staff should satisfy should be satisfied that the minimum distance separation formula provisions are met. The planning justification report that went before council has been considered by staff at length, addressed the minimum distance separation to the satisfaction of both the region and the city for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. Next slide. I'm going to get into some detail here because we're asking you, but the condition requires is the landowner to spend a considerable amount of money in advance of when while the money doesn't need to be spent, period. The minimum distance separation guideline number 12 provides that a reduced minimum distance separation, setback, to be permitted where there are 4 or more dwellings closer to the livestock facility than the proposed development, located within the intervening area between the closest part of the proposed development and the nearest livestock facility, located on separate lots, and of the same or greater sensitivity as the proposed development or dwelling. Next slide. This is the material that was provided to council showing the location of barns in the area in relation to the subject property. As you can see, they're all around. Next slide, please. There are 20 barns of various sizes within 1,500 meters of the subject property illustrated in Figure 3 surrounding areas, the one that was just up. A site visit was completed to identify, confirm the livestock facilities, determine the type of livestock facility, and assess whether the facility is active or empty. Next slide, please. A visual assessment was completed of the structural integrity of the facility, i.e., does it appear to be structurally sound and capable of housing livestock. Other land uses affecting the application of the minimum distance separation formula were identified. The results of the site visit are outlined in Table 1 site inspection comments on the next slide, please. We can go through this if you want, but there's lots of houses existing between the barns and the proposed new residential development. In my opinion, guideline 12 is satisfied. Next slide, please. Oh, goodness. Yeah, same thing. More of the same. Next slide, please. Barns 9 to 14 are eliminated because the minimum distance separation guideline 12 applies. There's 4 or more existing residential developments between those barns and what's proposed. Barns 1, 2, 4, 5, can are either unoccupied or too small or unsuitable to house a significant number of livestock, and or on small lots, and or the ability to house livestock is constrained by nearby dwellings, and or the barn is in poor condition. Not much left. Barn 3, that's the one that's left. It's eliminated due to its use as an event center. Next slide, please. So my requested changes. Delete the nitrate impact assessment and water supply potential condition number 7. Revise condition 8 to the, and there's the proposed wording, and delete the minimum distance separation requirement condition number 9 because it's being addressed because this is a new requirement and has adequately been addressed. And I'm going to go off script right now. I also suggest that a further condition be modified, and that is the condition, let me go through it. Condition for the restoration plan. The region's comments to the municipality in your, I assume it's in your package. Page 3 of 6 says, and that's in regard to private servicing. Therefore, provided there are no changes, that no changes are proposed to the existing golf course operation, parcel 4, there certainly are none, and the new class 4 sewage systems proposed for parcels 1, 2, and 3 satisfy the requirements of the OBC when applied for and installed. Region has no objection to the application being submitted, or as submitted. The hydrogeologic study, the comment is, the report is to be updated with the proposed location of the bed, dilution area, and groundwater flow direction, as the location of the specific systems will have to be located appropriately to meet the nitrate concentration requirements at the lot boundaries. See the example below, and again, that is a, I believe, condition that can be satisfied equally well at the building permit application. The same, in essence, applies to the requirement for the naturalization, which is condition number 6, the restoration plan. The same as the requirement for the septic and hydrogeologic requirements can be tied to a requirement for the applicant to provide notice that they're necessary through agreement of sale and purchase, can also apply equally well to the restoration plan. So those are my comments in general and in specific. The proposals are recommended to be approved. There are, of course, conditions that go with that. Our concern is just some of those conditions seem to be out of lockstep with the way development normally happens. Certainly, the requirement for the septic systems needs to be made future purchasers need to be made aware of that. Future purchases should also then, I believe, be made aware of the requirement for the amendment to the hydrogeologic study, and future purchasers should also be made aware of the requirement for the naturalization plan. They can be done through the building permit process. If you have questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rivers. I like the presentation. I like how it's broken down. Very understandable. Have you seen the draft of what were possible recommendations?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I have.
Yep. So with respect to number 7 here, on the recommendation of the planning department, the nitrate impact assessment, and 8, which is about whether it's an undertaking or whether it's at time of building permit or all that kind of stuff, I get. Through you to our chief planner. So in your recommendations, my concern between the 2 competing recommendations is one on the building permit side. I'm concerned that 2, 3, 5 years from now, when lot 3 gets developed and there'll be 3 different building inspectors and all of that happens, that either the buyer of that lot or the builder at the time, somewhere in the building permit, a buyer's going to buy, and it could get noted of the requirements, and this would go the same for the nitrate impact assessment, all of a sudden walks in And somebody has to look up that on those lots, there's Mr. Rivers' revised wording or our wording. I'm concerned with process. Would that be better said, I mean, at the time that that house gets built, I think you're quite right that the house configuration could change a lot of things. The proposed builder of the septic system is bound to meet all the conditions of the day. Wouldn't that be best wrapped up on title so that there is, the buyer is aware, and when he comes in and gets a building permit and those conditions are on title, everybody's aware, the rules of the day apply, nobody's concerned about notice. So through you to the chief planner, could there be some form of merger of 7 and 8 to still cover that, but in a broader attempt that makes an easier process for the buyer or the septic people's approval, bonding and everything at the time of build? So it still does click into building permit, but it's on title. Maybe to the chief planner first.
Through the chair to the Committee of Adjustment member and the rest of the committee. The conditions that we're speaking about were requested by Niagara Region staff. Niagara Region staff are the experts in terms of septic systems and hydrogeological studies. City staff kind of rely on their expertise in terms of what conditions are necessary and required as part of conditions of consent in the rural area. I would be hesitant to request or to suggest or support changing any of these conditions, considering that they are the experts and have the experience. I would really hesitate to kind of go down that path. They've put these conditions here for a reason, and we support and believe that these should be kind of maintained and addressed before the final kind of lots are created.
But to that end, I guess one option is to not change those conditions, and we'll get into it more, because I'd like to hear Mr. Rivers' point of view, but to ensure that the buyer then knows what he's buying. So it doesn't change the condition, but it changes it to be on title. Like, I just worry that there's a risk that 5 years from now, when somebody goes to buy that lot, and we've seen this here before, that people weren't aware. So you buy the lot, you build 2 years later, you go in to get a building permit. Somebody in buildings had to have, like, how would building know that this lot has these conditions on it, A? And why wouldn't it be better to let everybody know at the time of purchase what they're getting into?
Through the chair to the committee member, condition number 8 does speak to a written undertaking that any future purchases and sales agreements would include that clause. I have not seen any such clause written on or put on title of a property in the future. The intent is that these are to be addressed before the lots are created. The written undertaking is of a legal status, saying that the purchase and sale agreements will include kind of that clause that they need to deal with these items.
So, just for clarity, if I could, so you're saying that if person A is purchasing the lot, whenever that may be, the seller of the day has to advise the buyer that this is in place. And if they don't, then they're off to a court.
Through the chair to the committee member, they would be providing a written undertaking, so a legal statement that they would include that clause in a purchase and sale agreement, and that it would speak to the components for how to deal with septic. My computer went dead. So they are legally saying, yes, we will ensure that any purchase and sale agreement includes that clause so that the purchaser is made aware.
If I could, Mr. Rivers, with respect to that wording and yours, is there any overlap? There are probably not. That's why we included it in your presentation. But can you understand? I mean, it does seem logical to me that we're going to want to. I mean, I think they're both headed in the direction that the guy putting in the septic system or you selling the house still got to be aware of the law of the land or these conditions at the time. But where's the what is the problem with 7 and 8 as they are written in the proposal that you see could be better resolved with your solution?
Through the chair to Councillor Bruno. Councillor Bruno, you actually hit on something that I missed in what I was looking at. First of all, I'm looking at condition 6 and 7 to be combined with condition 8. And I draw your attention to condition number 4, that the applicant sign the City of Port Colborne Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining the development charges and cash in lieu, dedication of land, park purposes based on the appraisal at the expense of the applicant, wherein the value of the land will be determined on the day before the issuance of the building permit is required prior to the issuance of the building permit pursuant to Section 42 of the Planning Act. So there's a standard memorandum of understanding the city uses for that. You were speaking to the...
Sorry to interrupt. Is that not just, though, specific to DC charges of cash in lieu?
It is,
okay.
But it can be amended. It could be a memorandum of understanding, or it could be, I think as you were alluding to, a condition for an agreement of some description, including the memorandum of understanding, the requirements of conditions 6 and 7 and 8 to be part of an agreement to be registered on title. And that way, it's, as I think that was your concern, if I'm not mistaken, Councillor Bruno, that it's on title. So any purchaser will know what's required. It's a formal agreement and it's formally registered on title. The reason that I'm asking to do it that way is to do it as part of the condition of consent, is you're doing a lot of this work in advance of knowing where things are going to go anyway. They're asking to show where the septic system is going to go before where the house is going to go within the boundary of the zoning. And same with the the impact of the hydrology of the septic systems on the hydrology, and the same with the impact or the requirement to do the restoration plan. So it's to coin an old phrase, putting the cart before the horse.
If I might, just to that point, is not the purpose of asking this for up front is to make sure it's possible to actually comply? As opposed to getting a lot and then find out after we can't comply because it's all rock or fill in the blanks. I don't know whatever that affects it.
Council has already said that it will comply through its official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. They have reviewed and considered that.
Through the chair to the committee, the official plan and zoning amendment is to set the land uses of the property. That did not contemplate the severance of the property, to be clear.
And to that point, I guess you could, if you find out that maybe that lot isn't big enough, maybe you can only get 2 lots out of there instead of 3 because of the size and the requirements and everything else. I think that's the purpose of having that plan in place. Just say, okay, draw a box. assume this, worst case scenario, yeah, it can handle, I don't know, 3,000 square foot house, no problem. So therefore, you should be good going forward. Then if you build a smaller house, you should be okay as well. I think that's the intent, is to make sure that you can actually comply with the requirements when you put in the septic system.
With all due respect to the chief planner, council was very aware that the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications were to accommodate 3 severances.
Okay.
To that, Mr. Rivers, that may well be true, but the impact of those assessments, could it not change the size of one of the lots, for example, to fulfill the septic and effluent and the nitrate impact, and you'd still get 3 lots, but they might be configured different?
Through the chair to Councillor Bruno, the hydrogeologic assessment has been approved, recommends and has been approved by council that says that the lots can accommodate those systems. All that the condition is asking for is show where those systems go on the lot and how the approved and acceptable impact spreads out on the lot. The lot size isn't going to change. It's 2.5 acres. It satisfied the region with regard to septic system requirements. All the condition is doing is saying we just want to see where it's going to go.
Yeah, through the chair to the committees, I would be really hesitant to suggest changes to the conditions. As mentioned, the region is the experts. They have reviewed the studies in detail. They put forward reasonable conditions that I would hesitate to want to change, and then I wouldn't recommend any changes to the conditions.
That's it? Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Eric, do you have a question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess when I'm reading this nitrate impact assessment, water supply potential assessment, and the condition, I see it as, I mean, you can put, well, one concern is this study was commissioned by the applicant, so to put it on to a purchaser, then to update it, you would have 3 potential purchasers who don't have that arrangement with this particular consultant to update it. So I just don't know how that would work. I guess they have to reach out to them, but what if that company folds? I don't know. I find that sort of like an interesting situation there. Also, I also think that what you can provide, could you not provide just a building envelope based on the zoning, and then put the potential where the septic would go?
Through the chair to the councillor, the zoning envelope is provided. The zoning bylaw has specific setbacks and requirements. The envelope within which the building is going to be located and the envelope within which the septic system is going to be located is controlled by zoning and by the OBC. And the location of that may have to change if the issues of the hydrogeologic study and the effluent flow would extend beyond the lot lines. But so that that's a requirement of how you locate the building and the septic system on the lot within that zoning envelope.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess I don't feel I'm knowledgeable enough on that condition to really make an amendment on the floor. But one other comment I want to say is that what seems to be requested is that it go on tight, like these conditions be implemented in a what could be a development agreement, or this particular undertaking for future sales, purchase and sales agreement, that it goes on title. And I guess I don't like the fact that we'd be pushing this off, like passing the buck to the landowner, the new purchaser. Whereas, I mean, it even says here, in particular with condition number 6, in their region's report or their comments, staff supported waiving the EIS requirement in lieu of a restoration plan to assure lands located between the drip line of the woodland and the limited development, i.e. final location of the new lines, were naturalized. So it seems like they've already made an accommodation by going and putting this restoration plan in place so that you didn't have to pay for any, or applicant didn't have to do an EIS. So if you can just comment on that.
Through the chair to the councillor. First off, and alluding back to some of the stuff that Mr. Bruno was talking about, the region is a long way away from here and a long way above what goes on in terms of building and construction. And if the province passes current legislation that's before the Lieutenant Governor waiting for approval, the region may not exist as a planning department anymore. So having a condition that says that an organization that may not exist anymore has to be look at this is going, again, we're looking into the future. We know it needs septic, each lot needs a septic system. From what Councillor Beauregard's saying, that's pushing that requirement off onto the landowner, to the future landowner. We know the lot will need to be able to prove that the sewage effluent is dealt with within the lot boundary. Having that as a requirement for the purchaser, made clear through a agreement registered on title, they know. Having a requirement that the restoration plan be a requirement for the purchaser, registered on title, they know they have to do that. And the concern about whether or not it's consultant A, consultant B, or consultant C that does it, there are, the ability to do that work at any time in the future is open to and capable to be done by any number of consultants. All the time, there are landscape plans prepared on individual lots by registered landscape architects. Having that plan be prepared as a restoration plan by an ecologist is, it's asking for the same kind of thing.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public online? Any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Assuming not. One question I do have on the sketch provided, and that 30-meter buffer to drip line. I have to say that is a new term that I have not heard. Is that the edge of the tree canopy?
I'll defer to my more learned colleague, but yes, the drip line is the edge of the tree canopy, which is deemed to be also where the edge of the roots go out.
Gotcha. Okay. And that, I'm assuming they're saying, is existing? Is that the way that was drawn? It says the drip line as per regional staff or region staff. That's currently existing now? Or that's what the proposed?
Yes, that has been identified by survey.
Okay. Fair enough. Just didn't know what a drip line was, just looking for some clarification. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments, there's a lot of discussion about some conditions. Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that I'd like to move that application B12-24-PC and application, am I on the right applications? Yeah. B13-24PC and B14-24PC for the lands legally known as Concession 2, part of Lot 20, located in the rural residential zone and in a special provision of the rural zone RU 82. The consent application B12-24-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 6, 2024. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Angie, any questions or comments? Not seeing any. All of those in favor? That'll be carried.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Is there any other business from anyone? Not seeing any. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the August 14th minutes? Angie, Eric, all those in favor? That'll be carried, and we're adjourned. Thank you all.